Hello, I am Brandy Foote, a licensed realtor in the state of Maryland, and I'm here to help. Today, we're going to discuss what closing costs are. They're also known as settlement costs, and whether you're a buyer or a seller, these costs will affect you. Now, you may be just wondering what closing costs are because you've heard the term before, but you also might be thinking, what in the world is she talking about? No worries, we're going to get into it and clear this up for you. Closing or settlement costs are just that. These are the costs that the sellers and the buyers incur in the process of selling or buying the property. Now, these expenses must be paid in order to close, or in some cases, you'll hear it described as settle the transaction. And a transaction is the transfer of property from the seller to the buyer. Closing costs are expenses that are often overlooked by home buyers, especially new home buyers, when you're making your budget for your home purchase. So let's discuss some of the expenses you'll incur along the way so that you'll know what you'll need to be ready for before you close. Now, this won't be an all-inclusive list because, as with most things, it depends on the individual, their loan program, the property that they're purchasing, and of course, the state or region that you're in. But I will give you some of the basic expenses that you should expect to see on your closing cost or settlement statement. So let's start with the lender's fees. Your lender fees are going to, of course, depend on the loan program and the lender that you're utilizing for your purchase. But in most cases, you should expect to have these expenses. So we've got an origination fee, and this is basically the fee that the lender is charging to provide you with a loan. The processing fee, which are the expenses associated with that lender providing you with the loan. Now there's buy down. So if interest rates are higher than your preference and you are able and eligible to buy points on your loan, that will allow you to put a certain amount of money forward that brings your interest rate down. If you're utilizing that program, you will need to provide that amount at close. And then there are things like your credit report fee. And of course, you should expect to have government fees and taxes on your settlement statement. This would include charges such as property taxes, transfer taxes, and recording fees, all depending upon which state, county that you are in. You will have title and or escrow fees. I say and or because depending on what state you are purchasing in, this may or may not be handled by one entity. So for instance, in states like California, typically you're going to have both a title officer from your title company and an escrow officer from your escrow company, and you will incur expenses from each entity. But in states like Maryland, you're typically going to have a title officer who is also serving as your escrow officer, so you will only be incurring fees from that one entity. In either case, of course, there are expenses associated with processing through your transaction and making sure that your deed is recorded with the state and county. So, of course, that was not an all-inclusive list, and neither will this be, but let's go over some examples of the seller's closing cost expenses. While the buyer and seller will see similar line items in their settlement agreement, it's the seller who will incur the real estate agent commission, and that's for both the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. When the seller entered into a listing agreement with their agent's brokerage, they specified the amount of commission that they would pay at close. In that agreement, they also give permission for their agent's brokerage to share that commission with the buyer agent's brokerage. Sellers should also expect to have incurred government fees and taxes, as well as title and or escrow fees. Okay, yeah, I know. What you really want to know is, so how much is this going to cost me? And if you've been watching any of my videos, then you know what I'm probably going to say next. Well, that depends. Unfortunately, I cannot give you an exact amount that it's going to cost. I really can't even give you a ballpark of what you can expect at settlement. But like I said earlier, you will receive an estimate that lets you know what your settlement cost will most likely be. Now, in some places, you can estimate that it's going to be 8%. In other places, more of a flat fee. When you're shopping around for your lender, this is a good question to ask. And when you're shopping around for your real estate agent, another great question to ask. They can lead you towards the title and or escrow company, and you can give them a call and find out what their fees usually are and what the county fees usually are. It really does depend on where you live. I can't even give you an answer by state because within states, there are localities and then there are smaller zones, and it really depends on the laws and rules and regulations of exactly where the property is located and exactly what loan program you've gotten. In either case, now you know to expect there to be closing costs. So it won't be a big surprise at the end, and you'll be prepared. And that's what we were hoping for. If you have any further questions, I'm always here to help. Thanks.